morning, everybody. Good morning. Deacon Mac, take a seat, please. Take a seat. Good morning. Join in with us on devotion today. All right? Gonna have a good time. Brother Reed gonna give us a song. Deacon Mun's gonna give us a scripture. I mean a prayer. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes, sir. Ready? Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're going to have Deacon McIntyre do the scripture for us today. So y'all join in with us, have a good time, and right after we have devotion, we're going to watch the baptism. Amen. So just be prepared for it. Keep your hearts and minds lifted up, and we will get started with our devotion. Thank you for your patience.
Isn't God good? Let's start with the 51st Psalm. When you get it, say amen. Amen. Yeah. This is the psalm that David gave after he messed things up. Some of us are prone to mess things up. Have mercy on me, O Lord, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me of my sin. For I acknowledge my transgression, and my sin is always before me, against thee. In thee only have I sinned and done this evil in thy sight, that you may be justified when you speak and blameless when you judge. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, you desire truth from my inward part, and in my hidden part you will make me to know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Make me to know joy and gladness, that the bones you have crushed may rejoice. Hide thy face from my sins and blot out my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me by your generous spirit. Then will I teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will be converted to you. Deliver me from blood guiltiness, O God, and renew my spirit. O Father, open my lips, and I will show forth your praise. For you do not desire sacrifice, or I would give it. You do not delight in burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. Do good in thy good desires to Jerusalem. Build thou the walls of Jerusalem. Then shalt thou be satisfied with the sacrifices of righteousness, burnt offering. They will sacrifice bullocks upon thy altar. May the Lord put a blessing on the reading of it, and especially the doing of his word.
Let us pray. Our Father and our God, it is once again that we, your servants, have come before you this morning to thank you for all the many rich blessings which thou hast bestowed upon us, from our earliest existence of life even right now to this present time. We thank you because you've been mighty good to us. You let us go and come without being harmed, rather than molested, and then you brought us out this morning to the house of worship. And once again, give you praise, glory, and honor. You've been mighty good to us. You've been better to us than we've been to ourselves. There are many things that we have done that wasn't pleasing in your sight, but you forgave us and gave us the chance to keep on going to improve ourselves. We ask you to bless the ones that may be sick this morning, or bereaved families, wherever they may be. Watch over them and comfort them, if it be thy will. We'll praise you and we'll glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
For those that stayed on the plantation, early Sunday morning, the old preacher used to walk down in between them Quonset huts, and he said, "Let's go down by the river," and they'll run and get them old raggedy Bibles. So let's go down by the river. So they're going down to have church and do some baptizing. He said, let's go down, down, down by the river. Oh, Lord. Let's go down by the river. And when they get through baptizing, when they come up out of the water, one of the mothers said, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, when I'm saying that I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, I feel better. So much better since I laid my burden down. When I'm dead, friends don't treat me like they used to. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, friends don't treat me like they used to. Since I laid my burden down, I'm going home to live with Jesus. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, I'm going home to live with Jesus. Since I laid my burden down, every run goes high and higher. Since I laid my burden down, keep on climbing. Every run goes high and higher. Since I laid my burden down, listen, burden down, Lord, burden down, Lord. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, burden down, Lord, burden down, Lord. Since I laid my burden, glory, 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 hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, oh Lord, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down.
We now turn the service over to the pulpit. Amen.
Amen. If you could be attentive to baptism this moment, any family or friends that wants to come around, this is time for you to come around. Amen.
Take me to the water. Take me to the water. Take me to the water to be baptized.
Amen. How many can remember the day that you went in the water? I ain't too good. We're glad to have our babies that's going to be baptized today. As the Bible says, Paul says that as the Lord went down in death, burial, and resurrection, you too shall be resurrected. And we're grateful for what the Lord is about to do. All right. Obedience to the great head of the church. and upon the confession of your faith, my sister, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Ghost. None but the righteous, none but the righteous shall see God. It's a great day for sisters to graduate in baptism, going in the water, and I know mom and dad is proud. But most importantly, the Lord is overjoyed because he said the children are allowed to come to him as well. So we're grateful for this young soul that'll be going in the water. Obedience to the great head of the church. And upon the confession of your faith, my sister, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Ghost. Amen. A joyous day that after the children go in the water, the Father followed. It's unique when man gives his life to the Lord, because then now he's saying, I'm ready to put myself in position in which the Lord has created me. And we ought to be glad about it, because today is a good day. My brother may be crying, but those are tears of joy. And so we celebrate God for what he's doing in these lives today. Obedience to the great head of the church. And upon your confession of faith, I baptize you, my brother, in the name of the Father, the one who gave his Son, and in the name of the Son, the one that gave his life, and in the name of the Holy Ghost.
stand for our responsive reading? We're going to be reading from Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verses 1 through 6. Being in unity with the Savior. I'll be the leader and you be the congregation, and we're all in on one accord. I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with you were called.
With all holiness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love.
Endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
There is one body and one Spirit, just as you are called, and one hope of your calling.
One Lord, one faith, one baptism.
One God,
one Lord, who is above all, and through all, and in you all. God bless.
well, he's my rooftop in the rage of the storm. He's my protector, he'll never do no harm. He is the bread that sits on my table. My God can do it, he's truly able, and I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
And I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
Hey, try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served. Well, he's my rooftop in the rage of the storm. He's my protector, there'll never be no harm. He is the bread that sits on the table. My God can do it, he's truly able. I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
And I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
Hey, try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served.
Well, he's my mountaintop. When I was down in the valley, he's my road to Damascus. When I lived in an alley, he's a good, good shepherd, and he watches over me. He's my hope, he's my joy, he's my victory, and I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him.
Well, I'm gonna serve him.
Gonna serve him.
I'm gonna serve him. Well, and try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served. Well, he's my mountaintop. When I was down in the valley, he's my road to Damascus. When I lived in an alley, he's a good, good shepherd, and he watches over me. He's my hope, he's my joy, he's my victory, and I'm gonna serve him. I'm gonna serve him. I'm gonna serve him. I'm gonna serve him. Well, and try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served. Come on, hit it, pick it. Yeah, yeah. You know there will never be no harm. He is the bread that sits on my table. My God can do it. He's surely able, and I'm gonna serve him. 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 Well, it's time my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served.
Well, he's my
Mountaintop.
when I was down
serve him. I'm gonna serve him. Yeah, try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served. One more. Yeah, he's my mountaintop. Window down in a valley. The road to Damascus. When I live in an alley, the good shepherd, and he watches over me. He's my hope, he's my joy, he's my victory, and I'm gonna serve him. Well, I'm gonna serve him. Well, I'm gonna serve him. I'm gonna serve him. Oh, and try my Jesus, try him out. He's worthy to be served. Yeah.
Let the church say amen. He's also my bridge over troubled waters as well. He's everything that you need. He is the great I am. God's word is true. It will never change. But it's faith that moved God. This is the finished work. You can actually lay your burdens down. You can actually have that peace that passes all understanding. You don't have to get weary in your way of doing. God is just good. And when I say he's good all the time, what you think is bad, God have a way of turning it around and making it good. Prayer changes things. Somebody prayed for me. I can honestly say, stand before you and really have a testimony myself. I was young at one time. Now I'm old. But I've never been forsaken. And I have never been begging for bread, because of he that sat high and looked low. Stand with me this morning. Father, which are in heaven, the one that bare the cross, the one that died for us, that we can go boldly to the throne of grace. Lord, you say in your word that we abide in you and your word abide in us. We can ask for what we shall, and it be given unto us. Lord, I look at this prayer list. This name's on the prayer list. I look at Mother Lucille Dorsey, Brother Art Spears, and Sister Stanley, Sister Leela Howard, Mother Taylor, Deaconess Brown, Keisha Blackwell, which I saw today, Faye Mitchell, Deaconess Littlejohn, the Mattox family, Willie B. Price, and our military, and a True Spirit church family. Lord, your word is so true. Lord, if I look at my heart, even before any else was born, I can hear the prophet Isaiah 53:5 say, you was wounded for our transgressions, that you was bruised for our iniquity, and the chastisement of our peace is upon you. And with your stripes we are healed this morning. And let me know, no matter what we feel or what it look like, we know by your stripes we are healed this morning. Lord, on this Jesus journey, we realize sometimes the road is smooth, sometimes it's rough. But I thank God that you are the door. Let your people know you are the door and we have to go through the door. Friends will leave us sometime. They also left you. People will betray us at times, but they also betrayed you. But you never lost your focus. Let the people of God never lose their focus. Because your promise is in your words, you have created us to be made in your image. Instead of crying, let your people rejoice. Because your word is true. Let your people know, regardless of what they're going through, weeping only do for a night, but joy will come in the morning. Those that are struggling with their finances don't know where their next meal come from, dear Lord. Let these words give them comfort. You tell us don't worry about what we should eat or what we should drink or how we should clothe. You said first seek your kingdom and your righteousness, and all these things will be added unto us. Let us stand firm on your word. You have promised us even heaven and earth would pass away, but your word would never pass away. Let us stand fast on your word when we are going through. When that child had went the wrong way, when we have trouble in our lives, let that word, dear Lord, of peace that passes all understanding in our heart, dear Lord. In the name of Jesus, let us be a praying church. Let us love one another as you have loved us, dear Lord. That you gave your only begotten Son, and your will is for none to perish. Let us have that same spirit that was in Jesus Christ. Let that same spirit reign in us. That no matter what our brothers have done, let us be a praying church. Let us continue on loving one another. Stir up the gifts, dear Lord. The ones that have been wounded by a tongue, dear Lord, realizing there's life and death in the power of the tongue. Let us speak life in a dead situation. Heal that one that's struggling with the past, dear Lord. Let them put them things behind them and press on to the higher calling which is in your Son, Jesus Christ. Lord, I thank you this morning. And I'm asking you to move by your spirit on every heart, every saint in here. Because you have commissioned us to go out and spread the good news. But before we can go out, Lord, I'm asking you to come in, dear Lord. As David cried out, create in your people a clean heart, renewing us a right spirit, that we'll be a light to others, dear Lord, that darkness will be drawn into the light. It's dark, dear Lord. But even in the darkness, you can't see the stars until it's dark. Let us be those stars, dear Lord. Let us be that light. In the name of Jesus. Realizing we don't even know when you're going to return. But you say you're looking for a church without a spot or a wrinkle. I pray that we be that church. That one day, dear Lord, when we stand before you, dear Lord, we can say, I fought a good fight. I stayed the course. I kept the faith. And before us is a crown of righteousness, that one day we'll be called good and faithful servant. Job well done. That our names will be written in the Lamb's book of life. That every tear that was shedded on this side of heaven, every tear be wiped away on the other side. Every day will be Heidi and hallelujah. We thank you. Move on us, dear Lord. Breathe on us this morning. Touch these dry bones. That we'll worship you in spirit and in truth. Satan, you have no authority here. We plead the blood of Jesus against you. And we're walking in the finished work. Realizing prayer is the key. And faith unlocks the door. And we thank you. And we rejoicing even now. In the name of Jesus, let all saints say amen. Amen. Let us say amen again. Hallelujah.
Good morning. It is time for offertory period. You are in the hands of your ushers and your deacons. Amen. Our Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for your many blessings, Lord. Now, Lord, I ask that you bless those that gave, bless those that could not give. And Lord, let these blessings be unto you today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, True Spirit. Trying to wake y'all up. That's right. This is our period of our service that we acknowledge our visitors. If you are visiting with True Spirit Baptist Church today, please stand. Give us your name and something about yourself. And remain standing because we have something for you. Amen.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Brown, and I'm visiting my niece and my aunties and a great nephew. And I just thank the Lord for being here this morning or this evening.
All right.
I have looked at the time lately. But it really don't make no difference what time it is, and I know you don't know me, but you know what? Somewhat we're kin because I know the Lord, and I'm no stranger to it. God has been good to me. Early this morning, he woke me up. Now, he didn't have to, but he did. So I want to let you know that nobody has to worry about me. If God come right now, I'm ready. I'm already fixed up. Hallelujah. I'm blessed, and I'm filled with his precious Holy Ghost. And I'm able to run on and tell the Lord and you about how good he's been to me. I really can't tell it all. I was in a church one time, and I was talking, so the preacher said, would you go up there and get that lady and tell her to come on? She can't tell it all. I got somebody else I want to help. Get this lady over here to help. You can tell it all about Jesus. You can't tell it all. Now, you can stay up here all day long, and you won't be able to tell it all. I wished I had a little time where I could sing a verse of a song, but I don't know anything about you guys, but I'm going to just sit down now and say,
Good morning. My name is Mary Ann Irwin. I'm here visiting with my sister Doris and my niece Christiana. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm here to vacation and relax.
My friend is Ward Piper. I'm from Louisiana.
Good morning, church. Good morning. Giving honor to God. I'm here as an old-time member, and I'm coming back home. And I thank God for being here.
Please remain standing. Did everyone get there? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming to visit us today. To add your own very special spice of life in True Spirit today. We thank you, we bless you, and please come again. We have a saying here. God loves you, we love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Please, Brother John McHenry has an announcement, and then William would come with the remaining announcement.
No.
Good morning, True Spirit. Good morning. I'm coming up here on behalf of the Anniversary Committee. We're celebrating 25 years here at True Spirit, our silver anniversaries. So we have some wonderful events planned out for you guys. Friday, August 9th, We have a musical. Some of the best musicians and singers in the city will be here celebrating with us. On Saturday, we're having a barbecue with collard greens. Everybody been hollering collard greens, but I don't know who's making them, but somebody has to make the collard greens. And then on Sunday, we're going to go ahead, 8 o'clock service, 11 o'clock service. And at the 3:30 service, we have Reverend Hendricks from King's Temple up in Denver. We're also asking each and every member to offer a love offering of what you can give beyond your normal tithes and offerings. Also, just to let you know, all ministries, if you haven't had your pictures taken for the souvenir book, please see Brother Reese after this service today. Also, we're still selling t-shirts outside in the vestibule. Last day to get t-shirts, and they will be delivered on August 8th and 9th. Amen. This is what we're doing as an anniversary committee for you guys. We're looking forward to celebrating, bring friends, bring family. Amen. We just want to celebrate 25 years of service to Colorado Springs and to this community. Thank you.
Good morning! Today is July 28th, and it is a wonderful day here at True Spirit. My name is JV, and let's get started on this week's announcements. So it cooled down just a little bit, but it's still really hot out there. And I know some of you may be going on vacation to escape the heat. Well, you don't have to miss on Sunday services. You can catch up on live or previous services and more by searching and subscribing to the channel TSBC Media on YouTube. Are you a new member to True Spirit? Well, we have a class just for you, and it occurs every Sunday in the fellowship hall, starting at 9:30 a.m. And for those of you who just want to dive deeper and learn more about God's Word, well, we also have our Sunday school class, and it's at the same time. Now, I'm going to be honest. If you don't know by now that it is our 25th church anniversary, then I have to say that you're slacking. But if you do know by now that it's our 25th church anniversary, then you should be giving all glory and honor to God for allowing us to have another year, especially our 25th year. This anniversary is starting on August 9th with our musical, and then on August 10th we'll have our annual church picnic. And I heard a little bit about what's going to be on the menu, and I'm telling you, if I were you, I would not miss it. Finally, on Sunday we will have our 8 a.m., 11 a.m., and 3:30 p.m. worship service. The theme for this year is standing together on this rock with a unified vision, coming from 2 Samuel chapter 22 verses 2 through 3. And the colors are gold, silver, and blue. Again, let's get excited because 25 years for any church is no small feat, and we are looking forward to 25 more. Now that does it for our upcoming events. Keep up with what's going on with us by searching and liking us on Facebook at True Spirit Baptist Church. Now here are the rest of your weekly announcements. And remember, God loves you, I love you, and there is nothing you can do about it, even if you try. Have a blessed week.
Give me a hurdle, I'll jump right over like a game of limbo. I get down low, I ain't worried. Show you a fight, cause I ain't worried, yeah. No matter what is thrown at me. If I'm in trouble, you get me in order. Push me out the boat and I'll walk on water. I ain't worried. No, fellowship, let's stand and fellowship. Cause worrying only makes you feel you can't win. When you're feeling down, remember you can't.
glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Come on, let's celebrate Jesus. Let's give him a hand clap of praise. You mean to tell me that's all you got, huh? That's it. Some of you focused on the heat. Focus on the Lord. Amen. 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 We are grateful that he has allowed us to be here one more time. We're grateful that we are alive and know that we are alive. Because we could very well be gone and not know that we're here. Amen. Amen. Be here and not know that we're alive. Today's a good day. Amen. I have a couple of announcements I want to give you. We invite you to be a part of all of the TSBC ministries. We have enough ministries that could strike your nerve to be a part of. We could never have enough people in our ministries. In fact, it's the ministries that help the church to go. And so we want you to be a part of the ministries. On the back of your bulletins, you'll see that there are various ministries you can partake of. So feel free to ask your family deacon who is in charge of those ministries and be a part of your church ministries. Amen. I know it's a little warm in here, but we're working on the air conditioning, all right? If we put the emphasis on God and heat, then we'll be all right. Amen. As the elders used to say when I was coming up, if you keep living, it'll be cooler days or hotter days. You take the choice. The choice is yours. So we pray that everything will be well. Also, made an announcement this morning, and I'll do it again. In August, we know that our school starts back. And we are a church not only for people that are lost, but we are a church for the community. We will, right after the church anniversary, I'm asking everyone to buy a pair of shoes for the community that we can give back to someone in the community. This is the following week, immediately after the church anniversary. And what we want to do is we want to fill that wall up with brand new shoes. Somebody say brand new. Brand new. Not something you done worn and got tired of. Amen. Brand new shoes for children from kindergarten to 12th grade. Also, the youth ministry will be doing two things. One, if you have a youth that is a youth of True Spirit, please see Sister Angela Sandoval or Sister Libra and give them the name, and they will get them a backpack. But in the process, the second thing we'll be doing is we'll be collecting school supplies and backpacks to give to the community as well. We have to begin to sow into our community because we are community-based. And when I say community-based, we are people from various areas of this community. And we have to let others know that we are here for them. So here's the deal with all this. You may have a friend that have a child that needs shoes. Pick your friend up and bring them here to get the shoes. You will not be able to call and say, can you put 2 pairs, 6 aside for my friend? Because they couldn't get away. We're not doing that. Take the initiative to be servants and bring someone here that need the shoes. Amen. School supplies likewise. Amen. Also, the youth ministry is working on also that weekend. It'll be the last weekend of August, which is the 31st, is when we'll be giving all these supplies away. We're working on haircuts and things like that here on campus. Also, immunization shots. They're working on that too. So we know sometime time goes by and we can't get these things. We're going to try to have all that stuff here the last Saturday of August. Amen. That's a good thing. Y'all smile. Amen. We want to give back to our community. We want to bless Colorado. Amen. And so each year I'm looking for this thing to get bigger and bigger as we do our part as servant leaders of the gospel. Amen. All right, so we're looking for shoes, kindergarten through 12th grade. Brand new shoes. I don't care where you buy them at. Dress shoes, tennis shoes. Take the initiative to go buy somebody a pair of Jordans. Got real quiet all up over in here. All up over. All up over. Air Force Ones or some Air Maxes. Something to that nature. Buy them some red bottoms, stilettos or something. Yeah. Get them some gaiters. You never know whose life you bless when you bless someone that may be less fortunate. Amen. School supplies, all that. You can buy all that. There will be a box out that you can put your school supplies in that we'll again give away on the end of that month of August. Amen. Also, we want to tell you that the church meeting has been rescheduled to August 29th at 6 p.m. It was scheduled for this month. Our quarterly meeting has been moved to August the 29th at 6 p.m. We want to invite you to our Bible study, Tuesday Midweek Fuel. We just finished up talking about having a character of Christ and how in having a character of Christ, it deals with our mental and our moral qualities that are distinctive. Not only that, we're challenged as Christians because we're fighting against power and personality. Our personalities coming up against the power of God. And if you are a true believer, you know that you don't have enough strength to fight the Lord. Y'all ain't with me this morning already. We don't have enough strength to fight God. So it's in our best interest to become submissive to his word and to his works and to scripture. Many can say I'm submissive to God, but not submissive to scripture. Well, that's impossible because the Bible says in the beginning was the word. And the word was God. So you cannot be submissive to him and not submissive to scripture, which means you have to humble yourself in order to be obedient to the voice and to the word. But most importantly, you are subjected to scripture and him. And so then your character should align up to what Paul said. Paul says, let this mind be in you, which is in Christ Jesus. So our minds should be Christ-like. The character that we have should be Christ-like. And watch this. Having a character of Christ helps identify God's people. There are many people in the city, in the states, in the country that don't really know who Christians are. Let me use another word, believers. They see churchgoers, but they don't see people that really believe because we fall short or we show phoniness when it's time of faith. Amen. So then we learn that even in that character, it draws members and it keeps members. I want to tell you, the pastor don't keep members in the church. The sheep keep members in the church. And if you don't have a character of Christ, it will affect your behavior. And when we act like goats instead of sheep, and we fight each other, and we bite each other, and we act ignorant, not knowing the correct way of treating one another, you have to treat others how you want to be treated. And so we learned that having a character of Christ helps draw members and keep members. Now, I know there are some that say, well, Reverend, I've been in church. I don't need you to repeat that. Well, the Bible's redundant, and God was repetitive. So I'm actually refreshing your mind because we have to be reminded sometimes our behavior, watch this, is unlearned. We do things thinking it's cute, but really it's not. Okay, I ain't trying to hurt nobody, but that's the truth. And when you have a character of God, he tells you to love your neighbor such as you love yourself. All right? So we just concluded that, but our next series is very interesting. Join us on Tuesday at 11:30 and 7 o'clock. We will be talking about, is there schism in the church? Is there schism in the church? So we want to invite you on Tuesday to find out what schism is. And I guarantee you, once you find out what it is, you'll probably say, oops, not me. Amen? Amen. We're also grateful that, that the Lord is blessing us in a mighty way. And as the Lord continues to grow True Spirit, we want to make sure that we continue to remain faithful to God and faithful to his work and his words. Amen. Continue to pray for all those that have been sick, going through whatever it is they may be going through. I know Deacon Munn has a procedure tomorrow. We're going to keep him in prayer. In the morning, we'll be praying with him. Continue to pray for our family, our loved ones, and all of our family all across the country. Amen. Amen. Look at somebody and say, I'm praying for you. You pray for me. And watch God change things. All right, let's give the brotherhood a hand as they come again.
Got happy already. I haven't even started singing. See, I'm used to the heat. I was in church when they had them old funeral fans. Every fan was the same. Hot. Grandma said, you haven't seen hot till you get down there. Oh, Lord. Reverend Greer, you might have to help me finish this. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, Lord. I feel like going on. I feel like going on. Though trial come on every hand, I feel like going on. Listen, y'all. I feel like going on. I feel like going on. Through heartache and pain, through sunshine or rain, I feel like going on. Going on. Going on. Going on. Going on. Going on. Though trials come on every hand, I feel like going on. Going on. Going on. Though trials come, that means you sometimes up and sometimes down. I feel like going on. Going on.
feel like going on. Amen. With your manuals of life, if you would turn with me to Psalms 34. While you're turning, Sister Wright, can you come help me out for a second? Give us something. Help me out. I can't sing it like I want to this morning. She would help us out. Also, our children are dismissed for children's church at this time. If you trust us, you can release them to us, and we would do all we can to teach them, but we definitely will protect them. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Good morning, church. If y'all would help me sing this song, it's oldie but a goodie. What is this? What is this? It's got me feeling so good right now. What is this? Makes me want to run on anyhow. Whatever it is, Lord, I just can't hold my peace. Oh, Lord, hold my peace. What is this? They say I'm acting strange. What is this that makes me love to call God's name? Whatever it is, Lord, I just can't hold my peace. Oh, Lord, hold my peace. And I know it makes me love my enemy. Oh, it makes me love my friend. And it won't let me be ashamed to tell the world I've been born again. Oh, yes, what is this? Got me feeling so good right now. What is this that makes me want to run on anyhow? Whatever it is, Lord, I just can't hold my peace. It won't let me hold my peace. Well, I know it makes me love my enemy. Lord, it makes me love my friend. And it won't let me be ashamed to tell the world I've been born again. Oh, yeah, what is this? It's got me feeling so good right now. What is this? It makes me want to run
Amen. 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 Thank you, Sister Wright. Thank you. Psalms 34, jump down to verse 3. If you're able to stand, please stand in respect to the word of God. If you have it, say amen. If you're looking, shout out Bible study. We got room for you. We don't discriminate. Amen. Let us pray. Our God and Father's preaching time. Lord, song gifts have been given. And Lord, we ask now that you would be the God that you've always been and share some more crumbs from the Master's table. Let me decrease. Let you increase in me. Let them see your image upon me, hear your voice through me, hide me behind the throne. Lord, we pray that this word falls on fertile soil and disrupts stony ground. So, Lord, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Oh, Lord, I praise you, give you all glory and adoration because you're my strength. And, Lord, I love you because you're my Redeemer. And the house said amen. Psalms 34:3 reads, "Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together." You may be seated. Amen. If you would help me and be so kind to just give your neighbor a Holy Ghost smile and tell him, neighbor, my worship is big. Now, I want you to look at that same neighbor and now look at him like you know him and tell him, neighbor, my worship is big. Yeah, my worship is big. It's big. When we look at Psalms, we think of all the things that David experienced as it's broken down in many different ways and in many different areas of which we all can relate to and even testify in agreements with. This particular area of Psalms is what we would call a classification of a hymn, but it also has a little poem with it. And in the hymn piece of it is basically where one would give thanks for what God has done and what he is doing. The poem piece is because it becomes more personal because can't nobody tell it like you. When we talk worship, you cannot develop a deeper worship if you can't develop a level of praise. And when you have developed a level of praise, then it's not complicated, but it becomes a custom that you become more giving to God. Because your praise, my brothers and sisters, reflect areas of your life and situations that you have been through that only the Lord has turned around in your favor. So then in thinking that it's a custom, then it should be easy for the saints to worship, but most importantly, it should be easy for the saints to praise and worship. Because if truth be told, many of us can go back and give testimony of our past life. But we always relate things to how David was, but no one wants to give recognition to their past. No one wants to look in on their past and be grateful for what the past has allowed them to experience. I mean, I wish I had some ex-baby kids. Some that know that you've been messed up, tore up some stuff, did some bad things in your life that you wasn't so proud of. Okay, let me change the words. I wish I had some ex-sinners. Some that can really testify and say, Reverend, I haven't always been saved all my life. I haven't always done things appropriately. Mama told me to go right, but I went left. I mean, I wish I had some people that can really say that I ain't always been what I am today. Since you want to get sanctified and a sedity, and can say, Reverend, I ain't always lived a clean life. There's been some things that I messed up so bad that I was even embarrassed to tell God all about it. And because he has been a God who he has always been, I can worship him because he's always showed up. He's always showed me that he will walk me into greatness. He's exalted me through my situations. He's even enlarged my territories, even though I messed up many places. In fact, my worship is so big that I can worship him because he still blesses me even though I don't worship him. In fact, my worship becomes so big that even though I'm not grateful for everything that he has done, he still blesses me like a faithful and justful God. I wish I had some worshipers that could just say, Reverend, I know what you're talking about. And I can tell my neighbor my worship is big because every time I turn around, God just keeps on blessing me. My worship is big. I believe the elders used to sing an old song, Jesus, I'll never forget what you done for me. Jesus, I'll never forget how you set me free. Jesus, I won't forget how you brought me out. Y'all know that song. Jesus, I can't forget. Oh, never. My worship becomes big because Jesus never forgot me. And so when I look at this text, and we peruse through this pericope that David has given us to give us some information about why your worship should be big. He gives us this pre-prompting of big worship, and this word worship in the Greek is proskuneo, means that he's showing us that we must learn to kneel before God, which means before we can even get to verse 3, you got to have a prayer life. I'll say that again. Before we can even get to celebrating him, you got to have a prayer life. And can I just be honest with you? You need to spend some time praying with God. You cannot get up and give God part of the time and give Facebook all the time. You cannot get up and focus on your coffee or your red beans and rice. You got to give God some time because he is deserving of the time that you have been given by him. And truth be told, can I just be honest? The reason why we can't worship in church is because we have no true prayer life. In prayer, we find out who and what and how we belong to God, but it also opens up the door to our relationship with God. And many folk don't want to be around somebody that's a square. You do know people that get saved claim that a Christian life is a square life. But how many know that when you live and you serve a God that's a living God, there's no squareness in God. God can adapt to every atmosphere and change to anything he needs to be. In fact, he will allow you to stand when the atmosphere changes, so then now you'll know whose side you're really on. And can I just be honest with y'all, since some of y'all looking at me like you're mad already. You ain't praying for me, but I'm praying for you. The reason why life is like it is in your life because you don't spend time to pray. You're always begging, but you won't ask God, what can I do to help you today? What can I do to be of service to you? What can I do to help your people? What can I do to give back to you? Because God, I know if I serve you, it will pay off after a while. So the proskuneo is the mindset of kneeling before God. Now watch this. When one would kneel before God, it shows humility. It shows humbleness. And you do know that people struggle with prayer because no one wants anyone to know what they're praying about. I find it very intriguing that Baptist churches will misconstrue scripture so much that they begin to make it a part of their life messed up. He said, watch as well as pray. Read the text. He said, had you been watching, you would not have been set up. But watch this. If you're praying, guess what? I will give the ability to discern when you're about to be set up. So then now when you see it coming, you can speak against those devils. Okay, let me go to another part of the text. Because some people need to know it's not when you come to the altar you worried about who's coming up. You should be coming up with everything you've done this week. And even what you done this morning. Some of y'all know you did some stuff last week and you did it this morning. Why worry about who's coming to the altar? You need to come to the altar and say, Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help do I. If I withdraw thyself from thee, whether should. But while I'm on the altar, I'll humble myself under the mighty hands of God, and I know you will exalt me in due season. The prayer life that should cause the saints to kneel to God. And I know some people are saying, well, I pray. But I don't have to tell everybody I pray. Well, watch this. If you can tell me you pray, but don't want to witness that you're a prayer warrior, I have to question your prayer life. Because I remember a time when the mothers didn't mind praying for Pookie and Ray Ray, even though Pookie and Ray Ray wasn't their son or daughter. In fact, Pookie and Ray Ray were some of the worst children in the church. And Mama prayed for Pookie and Ray Ray because she knew that you was hanging around Pookie and Ray Ray. I wish I had two people that could say, Reverend, I'm glad they prayed for me, because I know I was messed up as a child. And even grown up, I'm still doing some childish things. Tell somebody, say, you got to pray. You got to pray. Got to pray. And so when people come to the church, the reason why they can't get engaged in church is because the saints are showing no true worship. Because David was one that had a relationship with God. He didn't hesitate to acknowledge him as his God or Lord and Savior. You do know we do act sometime around people. We do get sedity and we forget about God. Some of us, this clean, this is new. This is another one today. Some of us would rather go to hell with our friends than to pray for our friends that they won't go to hell. Well, help me out. Help me out, Reverend. I'm going to do my best. Sometimes you have to show the very ones that's causing disruption and discord and order and malnutrition behavior. You have to show them that even though you my friend, I'm going to pray you out of that situation. I wish I had somebody here that don't mind praying for folk and that can say, Reverend, I've been connected to some people and I'm praying more for them than I am myself, because I know that if they don't get it right, the time is now to serve the Lord. We're living in perilous times where men are becoming covetous of themselves and they don't want to hear sound doctrine, but they got itching ears. It ain't waxing your ears. It's the things that you like to hear that ain't of God. So, as David gives us this part of the text, he shows us in verse 1 that you should have a premeditated behavior, because your behavior has to be induced before you come to church. Because you do know there are some people that come to church to mess up church. I believe the preacher says some people are born to be pigeons, fly around being messy. But there are some people that come in like doves and want to look pure, be pure, act pure, and be pure, stay pure. And you know, you have to premeditate your mindset for worship, because not everyone come to church is for church. The Bible says everyone that cried, Lord, Lord, ain't saved. So that could very well mean the very one that you're sitting next to might not have the right intentions when they come to church. You do know we have these styling style of Christians that want to be seen with the brand new hairdos, the brand new suits and nice shoes and clothes. They want to be seen, but no one really wants to come with a premeditated behavior. Why? Because it will expose you for who you really are. David had a premeditated behavior which exposed him as a shepherd boy, one that looked over those that were messy. Y'all know he was one that looked over the other sheep. And truth be told, the reason why churches are not growing is because the people don't prepare their minds for premeditated worship, which means you don't prepare yourself to get dirty with other sheep. And sometimes you have to be willing to drag a dirty sheep to the altar, not as a sacrifice, but one to come to be cleaned up. If God could clean you, then he should be able to clean them. So why not give a little extra to come before? Have your mind prepared that I'm going to give something back to God, not just myself, but I'm going to introduce somebody to this man named Jesus who can wipe away all of your sins. Got to have a premeditated behavior. And can I just stay there for about 2 more seconds? Let me get out the way. The behavior of the saints reflects your character. Your behavior reflects your character. If you don't have nothing to look up to, you don't know how to act. If you don't have nothing to worship, you don't know how to give. But my Bible says that if I be lifted up, then I'll draw all men unto me. So then my behavior has to be above what the pigeons like to do. My behavior has to be above what the turkeys like to do, staying on the ground making messes. Because he wants me to fly and soar like an eagle. That's why he says, keep looking to the hills for which cometh all of your, and they that wait upon the Lord shall, and they shall mount up wings. That means you can fly over some issues, even though the issue might be in your presence, because I keep looking to God, because I know that my strength relies in the Lord. Somebody shout out premeditated behavior. Yeah. But the other thing David shows us is that the propensity level is normal. Right there in verse 1, he says it. He keeps telling us that the propensity level is normal, that I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praises shall continually be in my mouth. And watch this. People should see you act like you're acting here when you at work. You shouldn't just shout on payday. You should be shouting on even on Hump Wednesday. Because watch this, you know payday is coming, but if I shout now, God, you just might bless me today. Guess how he blesses you? With more food on your table, clothes on your back, activities of your limbs, and covering over your children. I don't have to get a paycheck to know that I'm blessed, but when I recognize how blessed I really am, what you see is what you get. If I'm a shouting John in church, I'm a shouting John in the city. If I dance till my clothes come off, I'm going to keep my clothes on at work. But I'm going to let him know if I wasn't in this place, I'll give God everything that I got. Because everything that I have belongs to God. And the reason why we fail at worship is because people don't see enough normal people. So what? You done got saved. But the normal reality is you once was a sinner. And the reality is we come to church and we falsely proclaim to be something we're really not. Help me, Holy Ghost. And the reason why our worship is not where it should be is because we're not normal enough with reality. We look down on the youth because of what they like and what they do. But reality sets in. You used to listen to your ZZ, your Little Milton, your Bobby Blue Bland, your Denise LaSalle. Some of y'all looking at me. And truth be told, some of you still listening to it. And it might have caused you to get a drink. It might have caused you to blow one back. It might even cause you to go pick up an extra 6-pack. I'll drink it next week. But some people need to recognize you can't forget where you came from, because the church is a messed up place where people are coming to be changed and delivered. But if we celebrate deliverance, how many know others can know that they can be delivered? normal. Look at somebody and say, reality is I was a sinner. Yeah, see, you don't want nobody to know that. I ain't looking. Y'all looking at me. I know you was a sinner. I was too. And can I want to lay this in the lap of the preachers. This just came fresh. And he told me to share with the preachers, don't let the members stop your praise. If you got to shout, shout. If you want to lift up your hands, because can't nobody tell you about your own book. Can't nobody tell you how big your dictionary is. Can't nobody tell you how black the black book is. But when they know what you know, they don't know what it took for you to get here. So what? I'm a preacher, but I got a right to shout to the same God you shout to. So what? I'm a pastor. I got a reason to lift up my hands, because there was a time I didn't lift up my hands. But when I look back over my life and think about the things that God has done, when I go into the house of God, my hands go up. Why? Because all I do is win, win, win. Look at somebody and say, I got the victory. That's why I shout. I got the victory. Yeah, some of y'all looking at me like, you don't supposed to be talking that street slang. That's why you can't shout. You're too busy condemning folk and judging folk. But you know you was in the pits of hell at one time. You know you probably acting like you're still in hell. Some of you cussing so much you can't even say a proper prayer. But everybody know we all once was something. But I'm so glad for God's amazing grace that saved the... Not yet. I'm on. So. I just believe that if the real saints could just forget about where they are for 2 seconds and just begin to thank God for something He's done, all the haters couldn't do nothing but join in because they know where they are. But if they see your praise, I know the Spirit of God can jump off on somebody else. Just touch your neighbor and say, I want to shout with you, because we got so much to shout about. Touch another neighbor and say, neighbor, I want to shout with you, because I know you're a living testimony. Why? Because I'm a living testimony. And touch another neighbor and say, neighbor, I want to shout with you. Why? Because look what the Lord has done. I want to get back to the text, but I know I'm looking at about 40 of you that can say, if I can just look over my left shoulder and I look over my right shoulder and I think about the things that God has done. Sometimes it makes you want to run and ain't nobody chasing you. Sometimes it makes you just want to shout out, hallelujah. And I don't even know why. But how many know we serve a mighty and graceful God that inhabits the praises of the saints? You got that new house? That's a shout. You got the right mind? That's a shout. Activities of your limbs? That's a shout. Covering over your home? That's a shout. Protect your children? That's a shout. Clothes in your right? Y'all ain't shouting yet. Somebody convinced you're about to be losing their mind up in here. Why? Because you should have been dead a long time ago. But I thank God for Jesus, who died for me, gave his life for me. That's why I can shout my troubles away. Some mother should have lost their mind just a few seconds ago. Your child that went through high school, didn't go to jail, ain't on drugs. You should be about to, but the mama that might have lost their child to the world, you can still shout because the Lord says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. And they that dwell with your child is covered, even though wrong is being done, because God's love covers a multitude of sin. I'm trying to get to the text. But can I get about 50 of you that can just stand up, and I'll make 51, that can say every time he just keeps on. That's why my worship is big, because time and time again, he just keeps up. He just keeps up. He just keeps up. He just keeps on over and over again. You didn't have to do it, but God, you did it. You blessed my child. You blessed my wife. You blessed my husband. You blessed my grandchildren. You blessed me on my job. You blessed me in my home. You covered my bank account. You covered me in sickness. You covered me at the courthouse. That's why I can shout. Because you've always been a doctor that never lost a patient. You've always been a lawyer that never lost a case. And you've been my friend late in the midnight hour when there's nobody else around. My worship is big because when everybody else said I was nothing, you saw the best in me. When everybody saw the best, and I lift up my hands, because I never would have made it without you in my life. My worship is big because I'm stronger now. I'm wiser. And look at somebody and say, I'm better. I'm better. Look at him again and say, I'm better. I'm better. Some of y'all still don't get it yet. All because you ain't used to lifting your hands up and shouting. You don't supposed to do that in a Baptist church. But the Bible says, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Do I got about 5 redeemed saints, young and old, that can say, I'm glad he paid the price for me way back on Calvary. He came down through 40 and 2 generations. To one Friday, he went on the cross called Mount Calvary. They hung him high. They stretched him wide. Y'all know what he did. didn't he die? But he didn't stay dead all day Friday, all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Saturday. But how many know your worship is big? Because early Sunday morning, he got up with power in heaven and earth in his hands. Power to walk right, power to shout right, power to love your neighbor right, power to live right. And for that I can lift up my hands and say my worship is big because he did it all for me. He did it all for me. Can I get somebody that don't mind waving your hands and say, I'm so glad he did it for me. He did it for me. He did it for me. Look at somebody and tell them, neighbor, you ought to be shouting because he did it for you. 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 Didn't he do it? Didn't he do it? I got one question, and I'm going to leave it alone. Ain't he all right? Have you tried him and know he's all right? He'll be a wheel in the middle of a wheel. He'll be fire shut up in my bones, but he'll be your battle axe in the time of trouble. Granny called him Andy. She said, Andy walks with me. Andy talks with me. And he tells me I am his own. How many glad to be a child of God? Do me one more favor. Grab your neighbor by the hand and tell your neighbor, be not dismayed. Whatever betide, God will, God will, God will, God will take care of you. Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Yes. I should have had 2 cancer survivors that just about lost your mind. The doctor said you was gonna die, but with his stripes you was healed. But I wish I had somebody that know what it feels like to be walking in negative, not just in your finances, but negative in your mind. Won't the Lord keep you in perfect peace if your mind is stayed on him? Is there anybody here that can celebrate that God is good and all the time God has been good to me? David said, you should sing unto the Lord a new song because he has done marvelous things. Hasn't he done it? Ain't he all right? Just wave your hands and say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. I don't know about you, but I don't want no rocks to cry out for me. That's why I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of God. Why? Because I can testify that I am still alive. That's why I can come to the house. I can shout in the house because what the enemy meant for evil, God turned it out for my good. Can I get any victory praises that can say, Reverend, I'm so glad the favor of God is all over me. Grab somebody by the hand and tell them, neighbor, the favor of God is all over me. Woo-hoo. I'm trying to let it go. David said, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. You got anything you can testify about and know why he's been good? I challenge you on the count of 3 to give God your biggest praise and let the world know how big he really is. Y'all gonna go with me? 1, 2, 3. Somebody shout out hallelujah for my children. Hallelujah for my job. Hallelujah for food on my table, clothes on my back, health and strength, for covering, for protection. Hallelujah. Anyhow. Hallelujah. All the praise. Hallelujah. All the glory. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My worship is big. If I was allowed to go into the text, I would have told you you have to enlarge your view of him. Make him big when others think he's small. In many situations, we have to make him big when others think he is small. But since I didn't get to go to that, I just want you to know that you have to prepare yourself for worship, because there should never be a Sunday that goes by that God's people can't worship like this. Because normal reality is we all have been through something. And we can shout our troubles over because the Lord has given us the victory. But we have to be pumped and primed for whatever reason I don't understand. But when God has really been good to you, it's nothing to look at your mother or neighbor and say, oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let's make him big. Why, Mother Hendricks? Because he been good to you and been good to me. Why, Brother Price? Because he baptized you and he baptized me. Why, Brother Patterson? Because he covered me like he covered you. And that should bring about a change and a shout on all of the saints. My worship is big. Somebody shout out, my worship is big. Come on, let's celebrate Jesus. And I say, y'all, excuse me, because I try my best to walk the text so that you won't be lost. I try my best to teach you the scripture so no one can tell you just any old thing. I try my best to give you the scripture according to the way God has given it to me. But I do believe when the Spirit moves, we have to listen. And one thing I found out about the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, it is too intelligent to let me do what I want to do. And it's too intelligent to allow me to do it my way. That's why when it speaks, we have to listen. Now, I'm going to share something else with you. When we function under the auspice of the Holy Spirit, and we give God all that we give, when the word is spoken, people come to Christ. They say when the word is given, the response is made. That's how people join. That's how people become a part of the body. It's not how good you can hoop, who can run the fastest, who can sing the best. It's when the Spirit speaks and you listen. I've never professed to be T.D. Jakes, Creflo Dollar. But I will profess this. I know when the Spirit speaks. And that's how I operate, off the Spirit of God. So maybe some Sundays you don't get a complete sermon in that capacity. But I know the Spirit won't steer us wrong either. In fact, the Spirit will cause those that are Spirit-filled to respond. And so we do all we can as preachers and pastors to be in the Spirit so that the Spirit can lead and guide us, and that you can see the Spirit in us and not look at man. But how I am today, my propensity is the same when you see me outside. I can laugh, I can celebrate God, and I can acknowledge him for who he is. And I don't care who's around and what others have to say. And when we take ownership in God and who he is in our lives, watch this, your whole life will change. Take ownership of who he is in your life. At school, you can walk through the cafeteria and just say, Lord, I thank you, Jesus. On your job, they bothering you. You ready to quit. Lord, I just thank you. Your boss getting on your nerves. Lord, I thank you for my boss. Because I know it's just a test to make me strong. At the doctor's office, you can walk in before you even see the nurse and say, Lord, I thank you. I'm already healed. You got a court case. You can walk in before the judge and say, Lord, I'm innocent. I thank you. But oh, when you come to church and it's just a couple of us on the same page. They used to say when the saints of God get together, what a time it will be. I'll leave here tired, but I'm ready for some more. That's how the Spirit works. If you leave here tired making excuses and not want no more, the Spirit ain't in you. Because the Spirit always makes you want more, makes you hungry. He said, blessed is the man that thirsts after righteousness. As we stand and give the invitation to you that may want to come out of the area in which you're in